Welcome to the Uncivilized podcast. This is Traver Boehm. I am your host, and usually I'm interviewing a guest, but today I'm taking the mic and I'm going solo because there's something I've wanted to share with you all for a while. This is probably the biggest piece that came through me when I was in my dark retreat last summer. Yes, I've shared it publicly. I've taught a course on it already, but I've really been letting it marinate and marinate before bringing it to the podcast. And now I want to give you the framework and share the story behind OLSLAI. You may have seen this on my shirts, like I'm wearing, if you're watching this on YouTube, the two owl eyes, the dark adapted idea, that whole process. So this is the one life, soul-led, all-in framework. And this is what I want to be sharing and doing and teaching about for probably the next 10 years. Uncivilized isn't going anywhere, but I'll share at the end how the two work together. So grab yourself a cup of coffee or some kombucha, take a deep breath, have a seat. Let me share with you the story of OLSLAI. So going into the room this summer, and for those of you who haven't followed my story, this past summer I did a 49-day dark retreat in Italy. So that's 7 straight weeks alone in a pitch black room. There's a lot to think about and process with what I just told you, but just put that to the side. It was the spiritual initiation for this stage of my own life. Let's just call it that. Now, going into this process, there was a lot that was swirling around inside of me. I think the process started perhaps a year before my father had passed. My teacher and mentor, Tom Elsner, had passed. Some other people who were very close to me had died. So I was surrounded by and inundated with death. That in itself is intense enough, right? The death of a parent, the death of a mentor. If you don't know Tom Elsner, he's been on the podcast a couple times. He was a therapist I had who I can say was probably the man who knew me best on the planet. So when these gentlemen had passed, I was thinking about, what do I do for the rest of my life? How do I live the rest of my life at a different level and, more importantly, from a different place? And so now here's the story of the name OLSLAI. I went into this dark retreat with a mantra. You got to have a mantra, right? Like there's literally nothing to do. So if I got anxious or got squirrely or got depressed or got angry or got whatnot, I would repeat this mantra, and I'll tell you where it came from after. It was one life, all in, no cone. One life, all in, no cone. Now that mantra came because my teacher has talked about the idea of living one single life, right? Not a public life, a private life, and a secret life, which he says most people do. And I'll come back to this in a moment. I'm just giving you the mantra. So I was like, I need to reunify and deeper and how do I say it? Like solidify even more deeply my one single life as a man. That's something I want to work with and work through in the dark. Now, all in, I get that it requires to go all in on one thing, right? I remember Mark Groves years ago saying to me, what if you went all in on going all in? It's a beautiful frame to have for life. And then the no cone. Some of you have seen this video. I took my dog Sage to the vet about 2 weeks before I left for Italy because she had a broken toenail. And the vet was like, she can't lick her toe. You got to put a cone on this dog. You know, like the neck cone that dogs wear. And I was like, oh boy. Sage is like a 50-pound SWAT cop who has her own thoughts and lives her own life. This is going to be amazing. And I put the cone on Seiji. I tied it really quick and I let her go. And for about 15 seconds, she just went absolutely ballistic. Like a bucking bronco horse, you know, like kicking her feet and throwing herself around. And then she kind of realized the cone wasn't going anywhere and stopped, and her posture changed, and she tucked her tail under and she kind of gave up. And I remember joking that was the cone of civilization that has been put around all of our necks, right? And so, of course, I untied the cone and I was like, F it, just don't lick your paws. You'll be okay. And that gave me the mantra: one life, all in, no cone of civilization. And so in the dark, I would repeat that over and over and over for the first 2 weeks I was in there. Thousands of times when I was meditating, before meditating, if I woke up in the middle of the night and I didn't know what time it was, if I didn't want to work out, one life, all in, no cone. But I'll tell you all something. It didn't quite sit right. Like I could feel somewhere in my gut or in my chest that that wasn't the mantra or the idea that was going to get me through the next 10 years or even through this process. Because 49 days is a long, long, long time to be alone in a room with no light. Just let the magnitude of that kind of weigh on you. And you'll start to understand why having a mantra that was deeper would be so important. And so one morning, I don't know what time it was, probably around 4 a.m. I could kind of gauge the time based on when the birds first came out, and I figured that was first light. And that hadn't happened for, maybe it was 2 hours later that happened. I was awake, I gotten out of bed, I'd meditated, my normal routine, and I was walking the length of the room, which was 6 steps one direction, 6 steps the other direction. I knew because I did that thousands and thousands of times, and I would run my hand along like a 2x4 shelf that was on the side of the room so I wouldn't walk anywhere or bump my face or. So I'm walking the room and I'm like, I don't think this is the right mantra. Something else was stirring in me and moving in me that morning. And I was going and I was going. And again, folks, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to see. I'm in process. Like I've dealt with grief. I've dealt with stuff around my father dying. I've dealt with stuff around Tom dying. I've dealt with stuff in my family. I've dealt with stuff around my business. And I remember thinking that morning, I had been stuck on my business. Like, what do we do in 2026? Where do I take Uncivilized the brand? What do we do next? And I remember thinking, I can't be in this room for 7 straight weeks just to do business planning. Like, that's not why people go into a dark retreat. I could have just grabbed Dave and a whiteboard and done that in about 2 hours in the light and gone about my day. So I was asking that question too. Like, why am I really in here? What's the point of this beyond, do we do another initiation? Do we keep working with women? Yada, yada. And so I'm walking the room and walking the room and walking the room and walking the room. And my brain gets a little bit quiet. And I can tell that I'm in a semi-liminal, half meditative, half sleepy, kind of almost a hypnotic space. And that's when the word drops, OLSLAI. OLSLAI. And I remember thinking like, that sounds like Nordic or like Finnish, or Swedish, like OLSLAI. Like say it with a Russian accent or like a Swedish accent. And maybe like someone's name, like, oh, my name's Traver. Oh, my name's OLSLAI. Something like that. The gravity of it hadn't landed. And so I was curious because now I have this word in my being. I was like, what the hell is OLSLAI? And I literally stopped. And I want to give you some insight that throughout my time in the dark, on numerous occasions, if I stopped and I asked a question, I would get an immediate answer. And it may be in the form of like an image or a quick mental video clip or just an answer, right? Something would come in and hit me and be like, oh, thank you. And so I was like, what is OLSLAI? And I remember stopping walking and getting super still and just waiting and saying like, hey, what is OLSLAI? Why did you just give me that word? And hearing nothing. And being like, God damn it. Like I'm from the East Coast. I'm even though I can do 7 weeks alone in a pitch black room, I'm not patient. Or I struggle with, I'm developing a better relationship with patience, let's say. But I heard nothing. And so I just waited and waited more and nothing. But I remember feeling like, why would you give me this rando word without further explanation? So I just kept walking. 6 steps. I'd like push my foot out on one, or hit a cushion at one end of the room so I didn't like bang my knee on the meditation area. Then I'd turn around and I'd walk back, and I'd have to put my hand up at the 5th step mark so I didn't bonk my nose on the front door. And I did that for maybe, a couple hundred more rounds with nothing. Even my mind was blank. I wasn't chewing on anything. I wasn't talking to myself. I was just in this weird meditative space. OLSLAI. And then on one of the walks, in no particular order, and nothing had come before it, there was no piano drop of emotion, there were no chills, there was nothing letting me knowing that this was coming. I just said out loud, one life, soul led, all in. I just got chills. And I remember dropping to my knees and sobbing. And just crying and crying and crying and saying, okay, one life, soul led, all in. Now, what does this mean? What does it mean? And it was over the course of the next 5 weeks that it all started to unfold and come to me. So I'll share with you what did. The one life part you've already gotten. Most people, myself included, at times in my life, very heavily, lived a public life, a private life, and a secret life. There was a time in my life when I was a fitness influencer, an acupuncturist, who also would go home and get high and drink a bottle of wine, and also had a deeply hidden sexuality, right? I would not come out as being in the BDSM world or being kinky or even having sexual desire, because I thought at that stage of my life, like, God forbid, if I am a man with sexual desire, I'm toxic. So that was my life. Public, very upfront, high, let me help you with your health. I get people sober, teach people about fitness, teach people about nutrition. And then at night, some of my friends knew I like to get high and drink a fair amount, but not to the extent I was. And then nobody knew about my secret life, not even my ex-wife at the time. And unifying them is magic. Unifying them is when everything starts to come together. Unifying them is the first sense of freedom I ever experienced, because I never had to hide who I was. So think about this for yourself. Do you have a public life, a private life, and a secret life? Now, there's 2 ways to unify these, in my experience and opinion. You can either be public, like right now, most people know I talk about publicly. I'm in the BDSM world. I'm into shibari. I'm kinky. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. And I have books written about what I've been through in my life and the trials and tribulations. And, I'm very public about who I am. And there's nothing. You went through my internet history, you'd see exactly who I am. If you spent a week with me, there would be nothing that I'm hiding from you. That's one way to do it. My closest friends know, like my submissives and lovers know each other. Like, I'm very, very public. I don't have secrets. That's a beautiful way to live. Now, not everybody can do that, right? When I taught the OLSLAI course in January, there were people who said, my job is in the government. My job is in the school system. My job is in somewhere that if people knew, I also have these proclivities, these desires, these ways of expressing myself. Often it was around sexuality or my religion. Like, somewhere there would be, my life would blow up. I would lose my income. I would not be able to pay for my kids. Like, I can't really have a public life, or a public and a secret life unified. I can't get on a microphone in an interview and share all the things that you do. It's like, beautiful. So that's one way, is to be public. The second is to not have secrets internally, is for you to say, hey, this is who I am. And to have close people, your spouse, your partner, your lover, your whomever, know exactly who you are, what you're interested in, what you do, who you want to be in the world. That's another way, right? You can align. You can also clean up the things in your shadow. There was a time when I was married, right? And I've written about this extensively, when instead of saying, yes, I'm kinky and this is what I'm interested in, I would just hide it. I would look at it in porn. I would write it in secret ways and post it on the internet anonymously. So I needed to clean that up. So for me, or for a lot of people, it's not just I don't admit to this thing anymore. I work through the shadow side of it, if that makes sense. Right? So instead of having an internet history that doesn't jive in my marriage, sit down with your spouse and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. These are the things that I'm curious about. These are the things I want to explore. Is that available for us? If it's not available for you, how do we as a couple coexist where I don't have to have secrets or part of myself that I'm suppressing? That makes sense? We have a statement in Uncivilized: that which we suppress comes out sideways. So that which you are now suppressing, I guarantee you, comes out sideways in some way. This is a longer conversation, but I say like that which doesn't come out sideways gives you cancer. That's a biggie. Let's just put that to the side. So how do you, as best as you can, unify your lives? Private life, public life, private life, secret life, unified, as best as you can. I get that there's still going to be times and places and people that you're like, I don't want them to know that, as best as you can. And can you, here's the big question, can you look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, this is who I am in my totality? This is what I'm interested in, right? And it may not just be like, quote, deviant sexual activity. Do you like to write poetry? But you're a guy with like guys friends and you don't want your guy friends to know. Are you really funny and joyous and you want to do comedy, but you live in like a really strict environment? It doesn't just have to be what we would say like shadow as negative. Are you interested in plant medicine, but you're also a Christian? Like these are some of the examples of things I've had people work through. As best you can, unify your life into one single life. Trust me, that is the definition of freedom. It also gives you back so much energy that you are currently spending keeping those three houses separate. When you have a public life, a private life, and a secret life, you are working two jobs to make sure that those three don't end up in the same place. That is expensive energetically. Okay, I've talked about this enough. One life. Here's the biggie: soul-led. That's a big word. Right? There's books written about this. There's religions and dogmas and systems around like, what is the soul? Who owns the soul? What do you do with your soul? To me, I just define it as the deepest, truest part of myself. When I make decisions from the deepest, truest part of myself, my life works much better than when I don't. I have in the past, and perhaps you have, made decisions from either your ego, a place of woundedness, or your soul. Now, sometimes we find out later that we thought we were doing one, and then we later go, oh, wow, that was from a place of woundedness. And yes, sometimes there's overlap between those three. But again, this isn't about perfection, folks. This is about a different way of expressing yourself that may be 2 degrees different, 3 degrees different, 10 degrees different, or you go F it and go 100 degrees different than how you are now. So to tap into your soul, you start to ask really important questions. If this were my last year alive, how would I want to express myself? If I'd grown up in a different geography or a different family system or a different religion, how would I want to express myself? If I had no memory of pain, of wound, of heartbreak, of being shamed, of guilt about who I am as a person, how would I want to express myself? Right? My soul wants me to live a more expanded life. Your soul, in my opinion, wants you to experience the totality of the human experience, from the highest joys to the lowest lows. That's your soul is like a secondary being in your life. That's like, I just want you to experience as much as possible. Some of it's going to hurt. Some of it's going to change you because it's so beautiful. Those may also be the same. To tap into and start to get answers from your soul requires stillness, requires silence, requires a regulated nervous system, requires honesty, requires not being in survival mode to the best of your ability. You're not in reaction. It often is challenging as well. My ego wants me just to make $1 million a year selling bullshit on the internet. My soul wants me to write books about the pain of my life, the things that aren't sexy, the things people can laugh at me for, to share my story as openly as possible. My soul pulled me and called me into a room for 7 weeks alone so that it could reorganize me, clear me of grief, release me of trauma, and then give me this idea to share with you all. That may sound grandiose, but I believe it to be true. What does your soul want from you is a question to sit with, not for 10 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon while you're picking your kids up. But like, go walk in the woods, sit there for 4 hours and start asking this question, and I guarantee you will get answers. So often our souls speak to us after a major loss, right? I quit drinking the day my ex-wife left. I quit smoking pot that day. I quit looking at porn that day. Because my soul was like, do you really want to fucking live the way you've been living? Is this bringing you joy? Is this making you happy? Do you want to get to the end of your days? Do you want to be 80, however years old, lying on your deathbed and go, man, I'm so glad I drank so much. I'm so glad I did bong rips and sat in front of my computer with my pants at my ankles jerking off. No, it's not at all what it wants from me. However, my soul also said, you are kinky. You're going to explore power dynamics. You're going to explore space holding and emotionality and attunement through sexuality that most of society will deem as deviant. You're going to write. You're going to surf. You're going to be in the ocean. You're going to share this course. You're going to share these ideas. You're going to go back to the podcast. This is my soul work right now. Talking to you and sharing OLSLAI with you is my soul work. I could leave it in a notebook and just live it personally. But that's not the path that I saw laid out in front of me. So I'll ask you the 2 questions before we move on to All In. What does your soul want from you? It's one of the most beautiful questions you can sit with. And then number 2, what do you want from the soul of the world? What do you want to experience? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to meet? What human desires do you have? What deeper desires do you have? What does the soul of the world want from you? Right? I know that when I'm not writing and I'm not speaking and I'm not teaching, I want to go running back to booze. I want to go running back to dope. I want to go running back to porn. Because that is when I've disconnected from my soul. One life, soul led to the best of your ability. I get you got bills to pay. You may have a mortgage. Soul led to the best of your ability. All in. Now, the all in part. On day like 35-ish, I can't remember the exact day, when I was in the retreat, I was at a real low point, like a real low point. I knew I still had 2+ weeks to go. And for those of you who are like, oh, 2 weeks, that's not that bad. 2 weeks alone in a pitch black room after doing 35 days is an eternity. When you're literally living breath to breath to breath to breath, that is an eternity. I was also exhausted from not sleeping, from not getting fed, from being around people. I'd lost, 25 pounds at that point from not being fed a lot of food on purpose. Like, imagine, I was beat up. I was beat up hard. And I remember waking up one morning and realizing it was still, dead silent, which means it's probably like 6 hours till I got any food or something to do, which is a long ass time. and was just lying there, and I couldn't motivate myself to go meditate. I couldn't motivate myself to work out. I couldn't motivate myself to walk the length of the room and think my thoughts and like get into some kind of process. I just was lying there like smoked. And I remember thinking, there's two ways to leave a dark retreat. The first one is you just open the door and you walk out, right? Like you're done. Just tap, I'm out. Go back to the main house. Like, hey, sorry, I couldn't make it 2 weeks early. I'm pulling the ripcord here. That's one way. And there's a second way, which is a bit more morbid, which I'm sure you can imagine. And I know because the man who originally told me about dark retreats a decade ago had warned me going into this one. Sometimes people die. Sometimes people take their own lives. 35 days is a long time. I was not suicidal. I was not. I want to be very clear about that. But I had thought, if it was going to happen, I know how to do it. So we'll just put that in the ingredients here. I wasn't suicidal, but I had a curious enough brain to go, if someone was going to kill themselves in this room, this is how they'd do it. So I remember lying there being like, well, I'm not doing either of those because that's quitting. And I'm not interested in quitting, but I literally don't know what to do to get through the next 2 weeks. I don't know what to do to get through the next 4 hours. And I can't just lie here for 2 straight weeks. I will lose myself in something. I will go I can't do that. And so I was sitting there and being like, well, what the F do I do? How do I get through this? Truly, how do I get through this? And so I did what I do sometimes. And I asked the room, how the hell do I get through the next 2 weeks? And boom, instantly I heard, what is required of you now is a heroic effort because you have chosen a Herculean task. Now, some of you, I do a talk now. I wrote a talk in the dark, by the way, called Into the Dark, and I've done it here in Boulder, and I'm going to be doing it in Nashville and Austin. And in it, I tell this story of in that moment. I don't know how many of you have seen the Eddie Murphy movie. I can't remember the movie, but there's just that little fat kid, and he's like, Hercules, right? So I started thinking, I heard that, and I was like, Hercules. So it was good to have some humor. And then I really sat with what it was saying, like what I'd been told. That it was going to require a heroic effort, because a Herculean task to me was something bigger than human. That playing with a dark retreat that long required me to tap into some energy source that wasn't otherworldly, but was spiritual. It was the energy of my soul, right? I couldn't willpower. I'd willpowered myself as far as I got. I'd stubborned myself. I'd obstinate myself. Like, I'm a pretty motivated little human. I tapped into anger. I tapped into just like, F it, I'm not leaving. But I needed to tap into some different energy source, like dig deeper, like reach deeper past my willpower, past trauma, and into the depth of like, energy of the gods, whatever you want to call that, spiritual energy, soul energy. Like, that's the requirement, a heroic effort. And I remember hearing this and sussing that out over about 60 seconds, swinging my legs over the bed, taking a deep breath, and going to meditate. And the rest of the day was smooth. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. Every Friday, this was, I think, a Tuesday, every Friday, our pizza would come in, change the linens, change the bedding, wipe down the bathroom, have a 5-minute conversation with me, make sure I wasn't shithouse crazy, and then she'd leave. And for those of you who want the logistics of that, I would keep a blindfold on. She would come in at night. She'd wear a headlamp, and that's how she'd do it. If you want to go back and listen to the episode, I have an episode that will link in the show notes here about me interviewing Arpita. So that Friday she comes in and I tell her this story. I was like, Arpita, it told me What is required is a heroic effort, because what I've chosen is a Herculean task. And then I said this sentence, and this sentence is the game changer, folks. I said to her, and I have a feeling that the real heroic effort begins the day I leave. And she got real quiet and then told me a story of Mahavira, which is, I believe, a Hindu god who was consistently bringing people back to their soul's path. And after saying that to her, and after her leaving and hearing that idea of Mahavira, the next couple days like flew by. I had so much energy in my body. But I'm telling you all this story, not just to share a story of the dark, but to say that if you want to live one singular aligned life that is soul-led, the requirement is a heroic effort. The requirement is you are going to get your ass handed to you, most likely. I did. You're going to get the rug ripped out from under you. You're going to get challenged and tested, because society, civilization, the civilized world, does not want you living this. It's a whole nother conversation. But think about how much of our lives, our worlds in the West, in society, in suburbia, are set up for you to live a unified, aligned life that is drawn upon from the depth of your soul, and you go all in without distraction, right? Without guilt, without shame, without societal pressure to pick a political party or an ideology or a dogma or something, but to live your individual dharma. That ain't how it's set up. How are we going to sell you shit? Are we going to get you hooked on pharmaceuticals and get you to eat McDonald's and buy shitty cars and hate each other? A heroic effort. One life, soul-led, all in. Now, this may sound great as a theory. Like, cool, you have great theory, bro. But I'll tell you a couple stories. When I did the Into the Dark talk, when I laid this whole thing out over the course of 90 minutes, had people journal and do exercises live in person here in Boulder, I had people come up to me after that talk, like literally shaking, saying, I can't even speak. This is profound. This is the thing that I needed. This landed so deeply in my body that I'm terrified of how it's going to reorganize my life. I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. I've had people quit their jobs. I've had people leave their relationships. I've had people get into new relationships. I've had people start writing careers, open entire businesses, move countries, because of just hearing and getting the permission to live one life, soul-led, all in. That was from one 90-minute talk where I was on stage sharing this stuff. Secondly, I did this as a 8-week course online and had 10, 12 people go through it. And I've had the same reaction from it. People's lives radically reorganized, radically transformed, week after week. And in that course, what I do is break this down into 7 different sections: home and safety, sex and creativity, or power and sex, creativity, voice or love and connection, voice, choice, and truth, death and wisdom, God and rebirth. Those are like the 7 subsets of OLSLAI, which I'll get into in another conversation. But can you see and feel, just from what I've said in the past 34 minutes, that there's power in this idea? One life. You only get one, and time is flying. Unify it, align it. See what it's like to not hide things. See how that changes your life. If you sat in the middle of your life and simply said, this is who I am, now let the chips fall where they may. If you have the ability and the privilege, let's call it, or the resourcing to do that, physically, emotionally, financially, to do that, to simply say, this is my life. And it's going to be led from my soul. From my soul. And I will not waver from that. How would that change things? I have empirical evidence that it would. Now, 2 more pieces here. I would love to tell you that when I came out of the dark with this idea firmly in my back pocket, that my life, magically reorganized itself, and it's just been rainbows and sunshine ever since. But I will be honest, and I'm not saying I'm not going to project that this is going to be your experience. The next 8 months were some of the hardest of my life. Just the shit that came down the pipe. Relationships ending, business partnerships reorganizing, people dropping out of my life, people coming into my life, challenge on every level, financial challenge, business challenge, societal challenge, being attacked online, like you name it, I've lived through it. More people dying. It has been a kick in the balls. And underneath all of that drama and chaos, I've been able to sit more still and grounded than I ever have in my life. So while the upper is reorganizing itself, the lower is solid. That's my hope if this is what you take on. Now, I want to share, because it would be inappropriate not to, how does this jive with Uncivilized? You're listening to the Uncivilized podcast, a movement for 1 million men to express their masculinity to the primal and divine. Am I leaving Uncivilized? Absolutely not. Is Uncivilized going away? Absolutely not. Uncivilized is still the best process I know for men, especially entry-level men. If you want to change your life as a man, if you want to grow in integrity and have goals and transform as a man, Uncivilized is the process for that. OLSLAI, as I teach it and lead it and continue to do in the future, is for people who have gone through Uncivilized for 2 years or more and then are looking to come to a deeper side of the house. OLSLAI is also co-ed. OLSLAI is for everybody. Uncivilized is for men. Men need their own container. Whole nother conversation. Anybody who's ready to live a more soulful life, more soul-led life, a more aligned life, male, female, however you want to identify, OLSLAI is for you. To me, watching them next to each other, teaching them next to each other, has even further unified my life. Because I 2 years ago heard, lying in a tent out in Jefferson on plant medicine, it's time to bring women back into your life in a teaching capacity, in a leading capacity. And yet I still stand by Uncivilized needs to be for men. All right, gang. If this is interesting to you, you want more of it, please go to traverboehm.com/OLSLAI. I'll be teaching another round of OLSLAI soon enough. I'm going to be talking about it more both on this podcast and on my Substack. So please go there if you haven't. I outline each of the 7 areas on my Substack. I think it's Substack/Traver Boehm. If you're a man and you want to start this process of changing your life, of deepening your life, of learning how to be in relationship and in integrity, go to manuncivilized.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If this has moved you, you can either email me, traver@manuncivilized.com, or drop a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Or just tag me anywhere on Instagram @Traver Boehm. I would love to hear from you. How did this move you? How did you feel about this? Are you ready to go live one life soul-led, all in?